That looks good.
Looks great.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So today we're going to go through some house rules, housekeeping really quickly. Then we'll introduce you to the panel we have today and cover a couple upcoming Adobe opportunities, and we'll head into the Q&A, which we're excited about. Couple quick house rules. This is definitely a safe place for members to learn, network, question each other, learn from each other. So just a reminder, no sales, promotion, things like that. And if somebody shares an interesting story or whatever it may be, just remember it's we're here as a team and kind of as like a Marketo family, so don't share any other information outside of the group without consent. And then, of course, this meeting's being recorded. It's going to be posted at the mugsmarketo.com site, and slides will be posted, and any other resources that are mentioned during the meeting or in chat will also be posted as well, and you'll get the recording and slides over email after. And so to introduce your panel, I'm Jenny Robertson. I'm the SVP of Technology Architecture and Solutions at Annuitas. I'm an 8-time champion, and I'm here to moderate today. My pronouns are she, her. And a little bit of fun outside of work. I am a busy mom of boys. I have 2 boys, and I just recently started coaching their soccer team, even though I know nothing about soccer. And I'm excited to be here to moderate today because we have an amazing panel of speakers for you guys. And well, I'll hand it off to them for introductions. We have Max Maurier. I'll let you go first, Max.
Sure. I'm Max. I'm the Director of Marketing Operations and Analytics at Druva. Let's see. My pronouns are he, him. And some fun about me, I guess I do a lot of whitewater rafting. That's a little unusual. Based in California, in the Bay Area, there's not a heck of a lot of rivers right here, but we go up outside of Sacramento. So that's my summer activity. Yeah. What else? Did I miss anything? I don't think I missed anything.
No, that's great. All right, Chris.
I can go next. Chris Willis, Global Marketing Operations Manager at Trimble, and pronouns are he, him. And fun fact, I am an avid snow skier and really looking forward to us having some snow on the ground. I've got passes to Arapahoe Basin this year, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. And Michael?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Michael Tucker. I am first time as a champion. I'm the founder of a company called The Conversion Store, and we're a Adobe bronze level partner who works in Marketo instances, and also really active in the Marketo user group community. So highly encourage you to join up with the Marketo user group. And this year I'm also, in addition to being a champion, serving as the Marketo chair for the MoPros marketing automation community, operations community, excuse me, with I think we're at 1,800 marketers now.
Great. And then Vlad.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name is Vlad Vagner, and I'm the Senior Marketing Automation Admin at Mitel. My pronouns are he, him, and fun fact about me, I've been playing a lot of tennis lately. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, so great group of people today to help answer any questions that may come up. We've got a lot of questions recorded already, and then if you have any that come up as we talk, definitely put them in the chat. And then some quick upcoming opportunities just to make everyone aware of. The October office hours have been scheduled for October 20th, so you can go ahead and register for that. That's up and running. And then also to get invites to all the office hours, join the Mug chapter in the Mugs Marketo page and click join there, and you'll be able to get invites to all the upcoming months. And then when it comes to Marketo Engage certifications, there is 2 exams out there right now to be a Marketo certified expert. The E552 exam is the older exam that's been around for a while. It's the former Marketo certified expert exam. And then there is the E554 exam, which is the new exam that was designed by Marketo champions. Both of those exams get you the Adobe Marketo Engage Business Practitioner Expert exam. That's a lot to say, but definitely if you haven't gotten certified or haven't updated your certification, it's a great time to do it. The exam at the top, the 552 exam, is going to be expired. I mean, the exam is going to be retired at some point. So if that's an exam that you like, I definitely recommend taking it before it's expired. I haven't personally taken the new exam yet, but I can say the old exam, the E552 exam, if you are in Marketo every day, 4 months, you don't even need to study for it. You'll be able to pass it. But just something to keep in mind as you think about your Marketo Engaged certifications. I think that is the end. Yeah, the end of our housekeeping slides. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can start diving into questions. So the first question we got in, what is the best practice for the terms and conditions and privacy checkboxes on a form? Can they be required?
I'll go ahead and take that. So first of all, like the best practice ultimately is you need to consult with your legal organization concerning your organization's kind of policies. So I wouldn't approach this as a legal expert. We're like marketing automation professionals. So first of all, like bring any of these questions to your legal team. However, like not speaking as a lawyer, if you're asking about like putting these fields on your form to get consent, they cannot be required. So I would not recommend requiring any field that would be used for a lead giving you consent to email them. However, there are some cases where you've got like a privacy statement on your form and you need to, based on legal requirements, have them acknowledge that they've read the privacy policy. That can be required, but you can't use those just based on the consent laws. You can't use those as a condition for email processing. So that's my 2-cent answer to anybody else having some thoughts?
Yeah, I was in a scenario once where our marketing team tried to work email consent into the privacy policy, and use that same mindset where it was like, oh, well, because we're just having them acknowledge they read it, that's fine. But no, like, again, legal team got to start there. But I've never seen a scenario in which a legal team has allowed marketing to like just confirm consent as part of a larger terms and conditions or privacy policy. So just be aware of that too.
Great, good call outs. All right, next we have looking for a cheat sheet, countries where double single opt-in is absolutely required versus just best practice. Kind of related a little bit, but.
Yeah, so I can take that one. So I use a couple sites to kind of get my first opinion of it, and I'll try to drop them here in the chat. One is a little bit newer, but it has less countries. It just has like the major European markets in North America. The other one is a little bit older, but it has a lot more countries that you can look into, and both of those articles have the dates when they were last updated. And typically I start out there and then I go to my legal team. We have a data protection officer and I ask him like, hey, I found this, is this right? And then from there, he can usually, validate it a little bit and tell me like, yeah, go for it. Or like, you need double opt-in, you need single opt-in here.
Kind of mixing those two questions together out of curiosity, what is your guys' opinion on when you're getting a double or a single opt-in, can you require it? So if you're asking somebody on a form, hey, check this box to be compliant, to download content, say, how do you guys handle that? Do you require that checkbox be filled out in order to download the content?
For gating content, no.
Mm-hmm.
So like typically just like good practice is that the email opt-in, the consent is not, you shouldn't make that a condition of like downloading a piece of content. However, the only exception that I've put into place is if you have a form that's specifically to subscribe for content and you need to provide that checkbox, you can require that if that's the only purpose of the form. But that would be the only exception that I could see, like holding any mustard.
Yeah, that's another one where I've seen legal teams come back. Some say it's okay, some say it's not. Just kind of depends on who's translating it, I guess.
I think it's important to note that marketing ops is not responsible for making that decision. Like, I know it's sometimes hard to push back on legal teams and marketing leaders, but like their job, they're being paid to navigate the legal system, not us. They need to give us the answer and outline it for us clearly.
Yep. And within our organization, we have we have an organization within our company that is focused on data protection. And a couple of people in our legal team head that up. So we have a group that we can go to ask those questions that are specifically focused on data privacy and protections.
I think maybe
another thing that might be worth noting is, you know, like if you guys have that at the company you're working for, to go to them and ask for like, what are our company's guidelines, right? Because sometimes they might not be thinking about that. And that's what we ended up doing actually at the company I work for. And we were just like, we need you guys to create these guidelines so that then we can go follow them instead of asking you guys random questions every single time we come up to a new scenario, right? And so that helped us out a lot, because now we have like, you know, multiple pages of documentation and, you know, what we need to do there.
I think a piece of that too is just aside from making the decision about how you want to do it in whatever jurisdiction you're in, is to have well-defined program templates to make sure you're enforcing that you don't accidentally miss something along the way. So setting up the right smart campaigns and maybe even having the form embedded into your program template that has all of that that logic pre-built into it about whether you're going to check or not check a form and have double opt-in or single opt-in. And then also keep in mind that sometimes, especially think about Europe or jurisdictions where there's smaller geographic boundaries, that the information that you get, you know, when you're trying to kind of say, well, I'm going to apply this jurisdiction for people that are specifically in Germany versus people that are in France, et cetera, or even in, you know, borders of the United States, think of like the CCPA applying to California. If you have people that are located on the border of any of those regions, you might wind up getting information in your Marketo instance off of IP address, and that isn't necessarily going to be the truth of how you want to enforce your policy. So double opt-in is kind of, you know, good to start off with, and then see if can I get by without this, and again, always follow your legal counsel.
Yeah, great. So switching gears a little bit, the next question is, can you cover examples of how executable smart campaigns are being used? And maybe just in case everyone, you know, isn't aware of what those are, maybe give a quick cover of what they are versus a regular smart campaign.
Sure, I can cover off on that. So what an executable smart campaign is, it's a new feature that Marketo has released a couple of releases ago. So it's been in market for about 6 months. And essentially what it is it acts as a batch. It's created in the same way you'd create a batch campaign. So you have a filter, which is optional. So you don't necessarily need to provide a filter. Then you have your flow and your qualification rules. And then those campaigns can be called within either trigger or batch campaigns through this execute campaign flow step. And that flow step gives you the ability to either let the executable campaign inherit tokens, so your my tokens from whatever program you're calling it from, or not. And then when that execute campaign flow action happens, essentially your smart campaign that is calling it stops running. It behaves as an asynchronous flow, and the execute campaign flow steps all flow in sequence before the smart campaign that executed it will run its next flow step. So that's kind of a baseline. Where I've seen this really helpful is within your contact cleanup process when new leads come into the system. One thing I've noticed is with like the old request campaign, like if you're daisy chaining it, daisy chaining tends to slow the system down. And in some cases, you may have to put wait steps into your flows in order to make sure things run on time, especially if you've got like webhooks running. One thing that executable campaigns do provide for you is it provides a much more predictable flow. So you're able to like execute campaign A, B, C, D, and know that you're not going to run into any prioritization issues with Marketo. So it makes your contact cleanup process a lot more predictable. And that's been the use case where I've seen it to be the most helpful. It's actually sped up our contact cleanup process by about like 60 to 70%. One thing to note is because you can't run webhooks or you can't do wait steps out of executable campaigns, if you're using webhooks in any of your processes, you're going to have a kind of a combination of request campaigns and execute campaigns just because of that restriction. So any other use cases that you guys are using on the panel?
I think I'm comfortable being transparent saying that we have not even tried them yet. Like, I don't think I think it's one of those things where like hearing that use case was great. Like I hadn't heard anything that specific, and I had also had questions about the webhook component, and I hadn't done enough research into that. So I'm comfortable not pretending like I've ever used those before. But I want to, now that you described that, if I can help improve my cleanup process by 60%.
Yeah, I think, we're just at the beginning of using it. I've used them, I think, twice so far now with one client, and I see the use case for it. I think, I can't remember if we talked about, I think we talked before the call started about how you can inherit tokens. So you can keep an executable program in one, or a smart campaign in one program and then run it from another one with those values. And then I think the other thing to kind of give context to people, because not everybody has been in Marketo long enough to understand, I think, some of the like racing conditions and some of the challenges that you're talking about here, where, in Marketo, an instance that's set up and firing on all cylinders, sometimes you'll find spots where one part of Marketo is processing with a lead at the same time as another part of Marketo is processing a different part of it. So think of like, if you were going to visit a web page for your company to sign up for a webinar, it's not just when the moment you visit the homepage that counts as a lead scoring update for you landing on the homepage. It was the moment you sign up for the webinar, that's another set of points that get added, as well as the action of adding you to the event program. So, if you think about your Marketo instance as being, I don't know, an octopus maybe, where there's multiple arms, multiple tentacles that are working on different areas of your engagement. Okay, look at this, look at that, look at this. The executable programs are really there to kind of help you say, okay, wait until this thing is done. Let's not do the second step before the first step is done, because we need the first step to explain what the second one's going to do.
Yep. Yeah, I did have the advantage of being on working on an instance that we're starting to stand up right as executable campaigns were being released. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of experiment in more of a sandbox environment. Another kind of cool use case that I found, like with the inherited tokens, is with interesting moments. So with an executable campaign, what you can do is from your program, you can have one executable campaign that is kind of set up with all of your channels, my tokens. And then that can be executed, and then your interesting moment can be a little bit more human language, instead of using kind of the trigger tokens, which will impose your naming conventions and your interesting moments. So if you're looking at like doing more natural language interesting moments, there's another use case.
Great. So the next two questions, they kind of go hand in hand. So I'm going to read both of them, but two different people asked, Can you share best practices and favorite methods on keeping your database clean and users engaged? And the other one is, how do you maintain a healthy database? So those two very similar questions that were asked.
Yeah, I can chat about those a bit. You know, I think this is one of those areas where folks have worked in Marketo for a while. I think it's back to basics in a lot of cases. And for folks who are relatively new to it, you know, templatization, enablement, expectation setting for like new lead generation with your marketing partners and on your forms, super crucial to make sure that you have everything you need for new stuff coming in. For existing records, if you inherit an old database, I'm sure some of us have, the starting point for me is, you know, understanding first of all what I'm allowed to touch. Like there are certain instances where you know, I haven't been allowed to clean up contact records, only leads. So making sure that I'm really clear on what I have the authority to edit and update as a marketing ops person in the grand scheme of things is really important as a first step. And one of the other things that also is important, again, is understanding what the approved data sources are for cleanup. You know, like we've got a very specific enrichment platform. I'm sure a lot of folks have the same one for you know, lead and account enrichment, and that is the source of truth for a lot of our routing and lead and account ownership. Making sure that we use that as the first, you know, the first source of data cleanup is really important to make sure we align to our sales team. And also making sure that we don't mix and match data, I think is a really important point that folks sometimes miss. You know, sometimes an enrichment platform can give you one thing, sometimes your marketers will give you one particular piece of information, country, state, or street, or, you know, location information about someone, and then it gets mismatched and garbled with old data. Being really clear about when and how you update and what's necessary across related fields to update is really important. And then in terms of, you know, engaging your database, for me, I mean, maybe it's old school in the grand scheme of Marketo, but having a really clear nurture strategy for me is like the first place I go. Like it's all good to do ad hoc marketing, big batch sends as new content comes in, but to keep people engaged over time, you need something running behind the scenes to fill those holes where they pop up. And so I mean, I feel like being really clear about your nurture strategy, cadences, segmentation is the best starting point for making sure that your audience stays engaged over time.
Anybody else want to add to that? If
I
not,
don't know
we
if
can
there's
move to the
anything you
next
could add to
question.
that.
Yeah, that's very true.
Good answer.
All right, so the next question, and if whoever asked this question wants to like raise their hand or give a thumbs up, because I can't wait to hear the answer to this question too. I have my own thoughts, but the next question is, what is the best way to automate list uploads?
Yeah. So this is one that I think I'll take on. Actually, it's a good segue too, because it sort of relates to what Max was just talking about your data sources and making sure that you have kind of a good good tracking on where the data is coming in. Especially now with GDPR, we're really, you know, you really have to make sure that you have good records so that if anybody asks, you have to give them where those data sources are coming from, that this is kind of a way to prove it. So one of the first things I would say when you're talking about these list uploads is number one, try to ask yourself if I need to use a list upload, or maybe I can grab this information from my CRM or from an integration that's already in place with your Marketo instance. And that's much more preferred than a list upload. And I'm gonna take you into the Marketo Champion Sandbox actually in a moment here and just show you why that's the case. But the bottom line is that if you do an import, there's a lot of different ways where you can deviate from standardization. So we try to build in a program template. You can download a basic program template from the list import area on a folder in your Marketo instance, and you can just kind of right click on these and say, or excuse me, just kind of import a program. But I'll show you the one that I have built out that just kind of modifies what exists in that default program. And it's basically a default program, has an import list, which you can or cannot use, you don't have to, and 2 smart campaigns. And this is a list import channel that we built out specifically to be able to track, okay, who's on the list and who did we import from this list who was created from Marketo for the very first time. So little shortcut here, we have a static list, which is there if you want to connect another tool. Let's say that you're doing a kind of a one-off import and you want to use Zapier instead of doing something a little bit more of a coded sort of an integration. If you look at Zapier, they actually have an action where you can add a lead to a list, and that's kind of one of the few actions that you can take. So I've built in this list, the static list import, and it basically what we're doing at the end of the day is kind of keeping track. Okay, who did we add to this list? Who did we create from this list? And why am I doing that? Well, at the end of the day, by doing it this way, I'm able to keep track of all of the different data sources to what Max was talking about here. So I set up a tag in this program. I can say, did I get this from an industry survey, from maybe a trade association, from a paid list? And if I, at the end of the day, if I'm pulling in all of my information from list uploads using this, then I can go in here and actually run a program performance report, and it'll actually tell me, okay, here's all the list import programs that are in my instance, and give me information on all of the leads that are coming in from those list imports over time. And you can click on the ones that you need to, but it gives you kind of one source to be able to grab all that information. And one last piece I'll leave you with here is kind of a shortcut, and it's not really well documented, but there are tricks here. If I'm going to import a CSV, and this is just a sample one that I made using the macaru.com website, but you'll see here first name and last name aren't easily identified as like city, state, or email. And one thing you can do in your Marketo instance, if you go into your field manager, you'll see under, if you look under first name, for example, I can actually edit the import aliases so that Marketo knows the next time I get a CSV that says first underscore name, I'm going to match it to this field, which is really helpful when you have a Marketo instance tied to your CRM and you see a lot of very similar naming conditions. Do I add it to first name for my account, my lead, my contact? All that can get confusing for somebody who's an end user. So you as the administrator can go in and set these email aliases to make it a lot easier for them to be able to use. And it's one less click for them to be able to do an import of the list.
Great, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Next, we have many thought leaders are suggesting removing the MQL as a life cycle stage for scoring and focusing solely on hand raises for sales. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'll step into here because I've had a couple lively social media debates on this topic. I think at the end of the day, it does depend on your organization and kind of how your sales and marketing alignment strategy is set up. So I know for a lot of us questioning using MQL as a KPI is somewhat of a heretical term in the marketing operations world. Like we've always used this as a metric, ever since Serious Decisions came up with its waterfall demand model. However, when you start talking to certain sales groups, that, they don't have an army of SDRs that are calling down on leads, and they really want to really focus the SLA on leads that are truly buying, giving them activity-based leads may actually be counterproductive to them. And this is something I've been thinking through and wrestling with for a couple of months, as my organization is starting to think through some of these things. So here's kind of my thoughts is, I think MQLs have a value if your organization is set up where sales and marketing are consistently collaborating on like lead nurturing. I think there is a place for giving sales a group of leads that are engaged but haven't raised their hand, for them to do like less cold call prospecting on. However, I don't know how many of very many sales organizations that would commit to an SLA on some of these, especially if they are questioning the lead quality. So I am starting to really lean more towards like calling an MQL or whatever whatever your acronym is, based upon hand raises, and then having some discussions about like what we'd call a high value touch, with some conditions. So a high value touch may be like they attended a demo webinar, they have started a product trial with you, they visited your trade show booth. Your organization, will have different like opinions, but we kind of all know what a high value touch is. But you want to kind of put some caveats on that. And this is my opinion. So, and I'm sure there's multiple opinions on this, where you don't want to send every high value touch. You want to put some type of data quality condition on it, and some kind of, like, I would put like a demographic score threshold on high value touches to make sure that you're not sending low value people. And we're all valuable, but for your sales organization, they definitely value certain personas over others, and just making sure that the high value touches are truly valued by the sales organization.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah. I love that answer. I think all of us on LinkedIn see folks always talking about, I won't name any particular names, but do away with MQLs, and I think that's terrifying for a lot of people. And at the end of the day, like, sometimes it's easier for MOPS teams that don't roll up to like demand gen orgs, to kind of have more of a voice in lead quality discussions. But the MQLs can be incredibly important and meaningful and valuable if you're taking the qualification threshold seriously. Again, it's kind of like marketing 101, but like the MQL number doesn't matter if you're not hitting anything else meaningful down the funnel to the sellers. So if your MQL threshold aligns to business success at further stages, great, it's a good leading indicator. One of the things that we've run into, we've had shifts in leadership. It's led to shifts in mindset about which parts of the funnel matter. But we've started to hold our marketing teams accountable for the conversion rate to certain stages as opposed to the volume of MQL. They go hand in hand, but without doing away with MQL, we say that, yes, you have a target and it has to convert at a certain rate. And we're not entirely responsible for that conversion. Obviously, we have an SDR team, we have AEs, but it forces us to not lean into volume without having to completely do away with the MQL concept entirely, because our sellers here don't want us to just give them hand raisers. They feel like the volume then would not be enough. They know there are different degrees of MQL. So personally, I think MQL is really valuable if you've got some sort of neutral voice having that conversation about quality and what actually matters further down the funnel. But for orgs that, like you said, Chris, don't maybe have the quantity of reps to handle that kind of, non-hand raiser volume, it may make total sense to hold those back and focus your marketing on how to get them to raise their hands.
Yeah, and Max, that was an incredible answer. Like, the two things that I really picked up on that is, like, number one, marketing needs a KPI that they can consistently measure themselves against. And then number two is focusing on conversion, and whatever that looks like for the organization, and having sales buy-in on the definition. So, I mean, whatever that metric is, whether you call it marketing qualified lead or you call it Mickey Mouse or whatever, is sales and marketing need to be aligned on the definition and committed to the handoff and the follow-up.
Great. Yeah, something kind of related. The way we started looking at it, I'd say probably 6 months ago, we actually have two MQL stages, a warm and a hot, and we consider the hand raisers to be hot. And the people who organically, MQL through scoring and interactions, they're warm. And our hot SLAs are they're fast, right? The hand raisers need to be reached out to immediately. The warm MQLs, SLAs are a little slower. So we're trying to meet that need for, I would say we're not getting rid of the MQL, but we're trying to meet the different need for the warms versus the hots, if that makes sense. There's a lot of different ways you can look
Also,
at it.
I really, one of the things too that popped up for us was if someone is really hot raising their hand, are there mechanisms that allow us to move them automatically to those next stages without even involving a rep? Automated meeting booking tactics. Because if you do have a small sales team, if you can do that, then maybe you can get more done and have them focus on less hand raiser leads if you can manage that interaction automatically for them. So I think it's also like there are efficiency plays that you can make as a marketing ops person to get more done, still prioritize hand raisers, but not necessarily eat up the same amount of time that they normally would in a rep's day. Sorry, Vlad, I talked over you.
No worries. I was just gonna add that like in our org, that's kind of where the behavioral lead scoring comes in, right? Is that we send over certain MQLs, but like every web page on our site or like different sections of our website are scored differently, different forms are scored differently also, right? And so then whenever the reps get it, they have a prioritization based on the behavioral score, right? So they might have 50 MQLs, but 25 of those are like top tier, I need to talk to them today. And then the other 25, right, are like, they're warm, you can wait a little bit to reach out to them, see if they bubble up to that hand raiser threshold, right? Or like if you have time, of course, then go for it.
I'm very like this what really gets me going. It's so like close to my heart. But like I also think there's a lot of pressure on marketing teams to evaluate quality of MQLs in order to justify their existence. The same pressure needs to be applied to the sales teams that are following up on those leads to address them properly. Because if you create a self-fulfilling prophecy where sales just starts to ignore MQLs because historically they've been bad from certain channels, the changes you make over time are not going to help if sales doesn't care about that particular channel anymore. And so I think, again, some teams are allowed to have stronger voices than others, but it's not, there needs to be a huge focus internally on the marketing side. There also needs to be a huge focus in making sure that those changes that you make actually mean something to the sellers.
So Max,
Yes,
in terms
agreed.
of
It's so easy.
that closing that you're talking about, Max, for those people that are hot hand raisers, is that typically coming in through like booking, like Calendly's, or have you used a dynamic chat or
Yeah, we used I don't know if you guys are familiar with Drift's Fastlane platform, to be super specific, but they added this it's essentially a Chili Piper competitor. And Calendly does a similar thing. SalesLoft I think has it built in as well, but basically what it does is you guys can go, I'm not going to promote our website, but on our forums, if you go to our like contact us or trial forums, it will, depending on the region and the criteria, whether they're a customer or not referencing Salesforce account list, it will pop up an automated meeting booking option for them to do that. And essentially what that lets us do is, sure, the reps ask for those hand raisers all day, but if we take that work off their plate, then they have to go focus on what we're sending them on the marketing side. Their time is not spent on the stuff that's already the easiest to get moved down the funnel. They have to spend time focusing on where we're actually spending our money.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I love that.
That's good stuff.
Do you guys find those direct bookings? Do you have a pretty good show up rate for those, for the people booking them?
Yeah,
Awesome.
Yeah, we do. It's interesting. There's a variation depending on like the size of the company. We see differences. Like if a larger company is coming to us, they tend to commit more to those meetings, but we have a lower volume of those. So there's some variation, but it's no better or worse than booking directly through a rep, and it removes any potential confusion. Like if an SDR is handling that, if we can just get it on a calendar, then they don't accidentally miss it or skip it or drop the ball. It just gets done right then and there.
Great. Anybody else before we move on? All right, that was a good one. All right, next question. Any tidbits on marketing attribution and measuring ROI you can share?
I talked too much on the last one. So does anyone else, if anyone else wants to chime in, go for it. Otherwise I can definitely answer it.
My simple like 2-cent answer is like, make sure that your program channels and your campaign execution through your program statuses are really solid, and that your success reps are defined. That and maintaining program costs religiously. So once you have that in place, you have all the data that you need for attribution. Like once you're moving the leads down the funnel.
Stole mine. That's what I said. I will add one other thing. I think that comes into play that oftentimes it's really important is it's really worthwhile to try and use some of the inherent features in your CRM after you've passed your leads off to the CRM, so that, I can't tell you how many clients we've seen where they don't use opportunities and they track them through different ways, or they don't put the values of those opportunities in. And at the end of the day, you look at some of the reporting inside of Marketo, the person performance reports and things like that. Those dollar values are populated not by Marketo, but by Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics. So, so use your opportunities, put in the values, and be diligent about your sales stages, and try and make sure that your it's blanking on me now, the forecasted expected value of those opportunities is correct inside of your Salesforce instance, and that it's visible to your Marketo sync user, and you will be a lot farther ahead in your Marketo reporting and in your overall business reporting on ROI.
I think Michael touched on something really important there, which is like the opportunity aspect, whatever your CRM is. And this may not be what Marketo want to hear on the champs call. I don't and have never used Marketo for any sort of attribution reporting, because it's not what my business partners care about. Like everything, if we're trying to justify our existence as a marketing team, it has to be in the framework of the finance mindset and the sales mindset first and foremost. And if they're doing that kind of measurement out of your CRM, that's where your starting point should be. And so making sure that, yeah, your program channels are aligned to your campaign types, and that however you're attributing, whether it's, source, first touch, last touch, or multi-touch, that those are aligned to your marketing activities. But making sure that the way you're talking about marketing success aligns to the people who control your budget is, I think, to me, probably should be, it should be the first thing that you look at. Is like, it's great to clean things up on the Marketo side. If it doesn't matter to those people, then it's going to be a really hard sell.
Yep.
I
would
agree.
add also understand what those finance people are measuring up against, because if you're not like aligned with how they view the world, they're not gonna buy your numbers.
Yeah.
Our marketing team, I don't see any of them on the call, so I'll say it, but they've been pushing multi-touch attribution for a really long time, and we're moving forward with that. Visible, great, awesome. But I keep having to remind them it still won't mean anything unless the finance team and the sales team buy into that as like a valid measurement. Otherwise, we're just going to be talking about it internally, and that's okay. Like, we can optimize our spend internally, but it's not just getting the tool in, it's selling it and helping those teams who don't understand why marketing needs to be measured a different way, helping them understand the business value from their frame of mind. It's really challenging, but aligning to those business. I think that's everyone's common theme is aligning to the actual the business success metrics is the key to attribution.
I think one thing, that theme that's coming out of all of these comments for the audience member to kind of consider is what you're hearing here is very consistent across Marketo as you're using it, is pluralism. Is there's multiple different ways to do things, and it depends on your business. Is kind of the underlying case that I'm hearing from Max anyway. Is that, you know, in some organizations your CRM reporting is a source of truth. In some organizations they'll take a business intelligence tool and just say, okay, that's what we're going to use as a source of truth. Some ones will use a CDP and do that, and others will invest in a multi-touch attribution tool like Visible and make that work. And some organizations will use Marketo as well too, you know, for what its strengths and weaknesses are. And so the piece that I'm hearing out of all these comments is, and we learn them too, right? As we go through different instances and go through and engage with different champions and different people, that, you know, you listen to what your leadership tells you in terms of what they're looking for, because at the end of the day, if the reports are built, but they don't service anybody and nobody makes use out of them, you know, if a tree falls in a wood and does it make a sound and nobody's around, does it make a sound? Sort of the same sort of thing, right?
Great. All right, we'll move on to the next question. How do you reason when to do nurtures versus one-off email sends?
Oh yeah, this is a good, okay, great question. So Marketo has these capabilities to be able to do, you know, you can do one-off email sends in Marketo as well if you want to. And you know, this question when it came in reminded me a lot of something that we covered in a Adobe Summit a couple of years ago. With Christina Zuniga, we did a session on special events advanced tactics. And so one of the things to keep in mind is there's the mechanical piece of it in terms of who's sending what and the amount of work it takes to send a one-off email and send off a one-off email and send off a one-off email and schedule that out. But at the end of the day, the real value add from a Marketo perspective is kind of that adaptive learning that you get from marketing automation. And it's not just, okay, we're going to talk and send out emails, but let's listen to see what our audience, our target audience is doing with our different marketing assets, our earned media assets. And so so that's one of the big things about nurtures is you have the ability within Marketo, within these engagement programs, to say, okay, who has already seen this piece of content? Let's not send them something that they've already seen, or who's signed up for the webinar already. Let's remove them from the invitations and just make sure that they get reminders. Who has opened up a piece of gated content and is spending a lot of time reading it or watching a video series on our product or service. And so that's really the, you know, where the benefit is that you're getting from taking that extra step to design out nurture programs above and beyond email sends is how do I build in rules that say, okay, I'm going to send maybe a specific cadence of marketing collateral to this group of people. But if I see or I hear or I see something in the data that tells me that they might be interested in a different piece of information, how do we adapt and pivot that and let the computer do it? Let you know, Marketo do that, so that you're not you know, you're not trying to decide that just at your time. If your audience members are working with your marketing collateral at 11 o'clock at night, Marketo is working at all hours of the day to be able to adapt and give the right marketing experience for that particular audience member, the right person with the right message at the right time, to be able to move them one step further down the line to making a purchase decision with you.
Great. All right, we are getting close to the top of the hour. So there's some great questions left. I'm going to ask the next question on the list, but if anybody on the line has one they were dying to get answered and we haven't gotten to it yet, we'll probably have time maybe for one more after that. So I'd say put it in the chat. We'll answer this one and then we'll see what comes in on chat. So the next one is, how do you edit HTML code to add litmus tracking in an email with dynamic content? That's a good one.
Yeah, and I can take that one. So there's two ways I've done this in the past, and I've done it both with Litmus, and we're using emails on Asset now. And so the first way is kind of quick and dirty. It's remove the dynamic content, edit the HTML, put the dynamic content back in. Of course, so that's not always the best answer, because if you have a lot of emails, right, and a lot of dynamic content, you kind of have to rework a lot of your emails. The longer term solution for that is to actually change your email template in the design studio. Like if you're using custom templates, you can actually put like the Litmus code, or what I did is I put a token in the HTML of the template in a specific module. And so then whenever I drag over that module into my email, and it can be a module as simple as like a line or some white space or like a little gray area at the bottom of the email, then I create inherited tokens in my folder that houses all of my email programs. And so then I can, for each program, I can then go in and paste in my Litmus tracking or my emails on Asset tracking, and then it'll get applied to the module that I'm using, and therefore I can kind of create different tracking for each email I'm doing, each campaign I'm doing, things like that. And then with using the tokens, I don't have to worry about not being able to edit the HTML with dynamic content. So that's how I've been using it. Does anybody else have any other suggestions?
Okay, great. All right, I didn't see any questions come in the chat, so we will do the next one that came in on the list. What is the impact of iOS 15 on email open rates?
I can kind of quickly take this on. This could be a conversation like the MQL one. Essentially, with the iOS 15, Apple is disabling the tracking pixel for emails that are coming through Apple's email clients, which essentially means that if your recipient is getting the email on an Apple device through Apple Mail, you will not see the open rates. You will not see the opens on those emails, which naturally means that your open rates will fall based upon the percentage of emails that you're sending to Apple. So the implication of that is that the open rate is going to be a less valuable metric for email marketing because of the reliability factor. You're just going to have a block of sends that you're not going to be able to track opens on. I don't see this as necessarily a bad thing, as like open rates are a vanity metric that and there's other metrics that are much more indicative and much more better leading indicators to revenue than open rates. So I think it's a wake-up call to us as marketers to create engaging content rather than focusing on the kind of the open rate metrics.
Might be a silly follow-up question for you, Chris, but we would assume that would also affect click-through rates. Yeah, like they're not gonna send us through clicked information either associated with those accounts, right? It's really just gonna be subsequent like form fill or additional content engagement that we can track back.
Possibly, we may be able to still get click rates because click rates are actually, because the way Marketo tracks click rates is through an intermediary. It goes through a token, so we still would be able to get the click rates.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we are about at the top of the hour. Amy has put in the chat next month's registration for the October Champion Office Hours. So if you're interested if we didn't answer your question or you have more, or just want to come hear, what the questions are for that month, please register. And again, you'll be getting the recording, the slides in a little bit. And thanks everybody for attending today. And thanks to our panel. Thanks guys, you did great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.